At my father's funeral, the lawyer opened his will. My sister's name was called and she smiled as she received the entire vineyard estate worth millions. When he turned to me, all I got was a single sealed envelope. The room erupted in laughter, whispers slicing through my chest like knives. I felt humiliated, erased, like I never mattered to my own blood. But what no one knew that day was this. Inside that envelope wasn't just paper. It was the beginning of a revelation that would tear my family apart, expose years of betrayal, and force me to discover what true legacy really means. After that humiliating moment at the funeral, life became a cruel mirror. Charlotte, my sister, basked in her sudden fortune. She filled social media with photos of wine tastings, designer dresses, and lavish parties at the vineyard she now called hers. Every picture screamed victory, as if she had won some invisible war against me. Meanwhile, my life shrank. I stayed in my modest apartment in Portland, juggling 2 jobs just to keep the lights on. My fridge was almost always empty, my clothes bought secondhand, and nights were spent staring at bills I couldn't pay. But the hardest part wasn't poverty. It was the betrayal. My own father had chosen her. My own family treated me like an outsider, a shadow. People whispered, maybe she wasn't really his daughter. Maybe she never belonged. And in that silence I started to ask myself, why me? Why was I left with nothing but a sealed envelope? An gnawing sense that my father was trying to tell me something the rest of them weren't meant to know. One night, after another shift at the diner, I came home exhausted. The envelope still sat untouched on my nightstand, staring at me like a silent witness. I had been too afraid to open it, afraid it would confirm that I truly was unwanted. But something inside me snapped. My hands trembled as I tore it open. Inside wasn't money, wasn't a check. It was a single sheet of paper, and a key taped to the corner. The letter was handwritten, my father's voice pouring through the ink. Madison, if you're reading this, it means I trusted you with the truth. Go to my study. The second drawer on the left. There you will find what was always meant to be yours. My heart raced. A secret drawer? I pressed the letter to my chest, tears filling my eyes. For the first time since the will was read, I felt hope. But hope is dangerous. Because if my father had hidden something from me, then Charlotte and everyone else would do anything to keep it buried. The next morning I drove to my father's old house. Every mile felt heavier, like the past was pulling me back. The vineyard stretched behind me in the rearview mirror, but ahead was the study where I had once sat on his lap, where he had taught me to write my name. When I stepped inside, the air was stale with dust and silence. His bookshelves stood untouched, his desk still neatly arranged. It felt like he might walk in any moment and catch me there. I crossed to the desk, my hands shaking. Second drawer on the left. Just like the letter said. At first it wouldn't budge. My heart dropped, until I remembered the key. I slid it into the tiny lock hidden beneath the handle. The drawer slid open, and inside, stacks of old photographs, sealed envelopes, and a leather-bound folder. My breath caught. I pulled it out and flipped through. Adoption papers. Bank statements. Letters with my name written in his hand. And then, another envelope marked in bold, for Madison when the time comes. I pressed the envelope against my chest. My father had hidden all of this from me. He had left me proof. But as I stood there clutching the folder, I felt a chill. If I had found this, then Charlotte, or worse my mother and Victor, would eventually come looking. And they would never let me keep it. I didn't even hear the car pull up. The crunch of gravel outside snapped me out of the haze, my fingers still clutching the leather folder. Then a voice cut through the silence of the study. Well. Looks like Daddy left his little favorite some toys to play with. Charlotte stood in the doorway, her arms crossed, her smile cold and razor-sharp. She had always looked polished, but now she was dressed like she came to fight. Heels clicking against the hardwood, eyes locked on the folder in my hands. My stomach tightened. You shouldn't be here. She tilted her head, smirking. Funny. I was about to say the same to you. That drawer was supposed to stay closed, Madison. Didn't you learn that snooping always gets you in trouble? I stepped back, clutching the documents tighter. These are mine. Dad wanted me to have them. Her smile vanished. Her eyes sharpened. No. He wanted me to have everything. You were just charity. A project. And now you think one dusty folder is going to change that. For the first time I saw the fury crack beneath her polished exterior. She lunged forward, grabbing for the folder, her nails grazing my wrist. I pulled back, my voice shaking but firm. "If you lay a hand on me again, Charlotte, I swear." She froze, her face inches from mine, her voice dropping to a hiss. "You don't know what you've started. This is bigger than you. Walk away now, or I promise you won't survive what comes next." The air between us felt electric, charged with decades of jealousy, lies, and buried truths. And for the first time I realized, this wasn't just a family fight. It was war. The morning after Charlotte's confrontation, Madison woke to the shrill ring of her phone. Her lawyer's voice was grim. "Charlotte has filed a motion. They're contesting the will. They're painting you as manipulative, claiming you tricked Henry into giving you those documents." The words sank like lead. Before Madison could respond, her inbox exploded with headlines. "Heiress accused of fraudulent claim. Adopted daughter versus bloodline, vineyard at stake." Her face, splashed across tabloids, looked nothing like her. It was twisted by cheap filters, by stories spun from half-truths. By noon things escalated. Workers at the vineyard whispered about rumors of bankruptcy, suppliers threatened to pull contracts, and one of her oldest employees found his tires slashed. That evening, Madison returned to the estate only to find Victor leaning against her gate, his shadow stretching long in the fading light. He smiled without warmth. "You see how quickly the world turns when the right strings are pulled. Walk away now, Madison. Take whatever scraps you have left and disappear. Otherwise..." He tapped his knuckles against the iron gate, each sound like a countdown. "Accidents happen. Sometimes to businesses. Sometimes to people." Behind him, two men in dark coats waited in silence. Not lawyers. Not reporters. Something worse. Madison's chest tightened, but her grip on Henry's folder only grew stronger. They wanted her broken, through the courts, through the press, through fear itself. But as she stepped into the house, her reflection in the glass door caught her eye. Tired, shaken, yet still standing. "They think I'll fold," she whispered to herself. "But they don't know me yet." The storm didn't take long to hit. At dawn, Madison was jolted awake by the smell of smoke. She ran barefoot through the vineyard, heart pounding, to find one of the storage barns engulfed in flames. Barrels of Henry's prized reserve cracked open in the heat, wine pouring like blood into the dirt. Firefighters battled the blaze, but the damage was done. Hundreds of thousands of dollars gone in hours. Neighbors watched from the fences, whispering. Madison could hear their voices cut through the night air. "Maybe she isn't fit to run this place. Charlotte would never let this happen." By noon, Victor made his move. A fleet of trucks belonging to their distributors simply didn't show up. Contracts mysteriously terminated. Lawyers dropped hints that suppliers had been persuaded to abandon her. And then came the cruelest strike. Her vineyard manager, Mr. Alvarez, who had worked the land for 30 years, was found beaten near the edge of the property. Bruised, bloodied, but alive. His voice was hoarse as he whispered from the hospital bed. "They said, walk away, Madison. Or next time it's worse." "Not me, you." Madison sat frozen, guilt clawing at her. Henry's legacy wasn't just vines and land, it was people who believed in him. And now they were being punished for standing by her. That night, sitting in the office with Henry's folder before her, she finally saw the truth. This wasn't about inheritance anymore. It was about survival. Charlotte had the law. Victor had the streets. Even her mother had joined their side. But Madison had something they didn't. The quiet, burning knowledge that Henry had chosen her for a reason. She looked at the smoldering ruins outside the window and clenched her fists. "They've struck first," she whispered. "Now it's my turn." 2 days later, Madison thought she had hit her limit, until the phone rang at midnight. A distorted voice crackled through the line. "Nice little manager you got there. Pity if something happened to your best friend." Her blood ran cold. Her childhood friend, the one person who had never left her side, who now helped her run the vineyard's books. Madison's hands trembled as she listened to the caller chuckle before hanging up. Within the hour, she found Sarah's car abandoned on a dirt road, the driver's door open, headlights still on. On the seat lay a note scrawled in red ink. "This is what happens when you don't know your place." Madison's chest heaved as she clutched the paper. The game had changed. They weren't just targeting property or reputation anymore. They were targeting lives. The police gave her nothing but tired excuses, muttering about lack of evidence and family disputes. Her mother's influence was everywhere, Charlotte's money greased every wheel, and Victor's gang left shadows no law dared chase. Back in the office, surrounded by Henry's papers, Madison felt something inside her snap. 4 weeks she had been on defense, clutching Henry's legacy like a shield. But Henry hadn't raised her to cower. He had chosen her because she had grit. She slammed the folder onto the desk and whispered through clenched teeth. They wanted a war. Fine. Now they'll have one. That night, Madison called every ally Henry had ever trusted. The vineyard workers who owed their livelihoods to him, the local lawyer who once fought a land battle at Henry's side, even the old rival vintner Henry had respected enough to shake hands with. One by one they answered. Not because of money. Not because of blood. But because they remembered Henry's integrity, and they saw his fire burning in Madison. By dawn, Madison stood at the gates of the vineyard, her people gathered behind her. Fear was still there, clawing at her ribs. But it was buried under something stronger, resolve. For the first time, Madison wasn't just defending Henry's vineyard. He was leading an army. And as Victor's black SUV rolled up the gravel road that morning, his smug smile hidden behind tinted glass, Madison didn't flinch. She stepped forward, eyes steady. This ends on my terms. The message came at dusk. If you want to see Sarah alive, come alone. Midnight. Pier 47. The paper smelled faintly of gasoline. A warning. A promise. Madison's chest tightened as she folded the note. She knew it was a trap. But she also knew she had no choice. Sarah's life, and Henry's legacy, balanced on this razor edge. When the clock struck 12, Madison stepped into the abandoned warehouse by the pier. The waves outside slammed against the dock, echoing like war drums. Inside, a single overhead bulb flickered, casting long shadows. And there they were. Charlotte, perched on a crate in her designer coat, sipping wine as if this were theater. Victor, leaning against a steel beam, rolling a knife between his fingers, his grin wolfish. And her mother, Eleanor, elegant as ever, her pearls glistening in the dim light, her eyes cold enough to freeze fire. Behind them, Sarah sat bound to a chair, gagged, her eyes wide with fear. Madison's voice broke the silence. Let her go. This is between us. Victor chuckled, tossing the knife into the air and catching it lazily. Oh, it's between us, all right. But your little friend here, she's just incentive. Charlotte slid off the crate, her heels echoing sharply. You never should have opened that drawer, Madison. Dad may have pitied you, but pity doesn't buy loyalty. You think those papers make you strong? They make you a target. Madison held Henry's folder tight against her chest. He didn't choose me out of pity. He chose me because I was the only one who cared about more than money. You three, you're nothing but parasites feeding off his name. For the first time, Eleanor stepped forward, her voice silk but her words poison. Madison, you were always an outsider. I gave you food, clothes, a place in this family, and this is how you repay me? By stealing what belongs to my daughter. The words cut deeper than any blade. Madison's knuckles whitened, her heart hammering, but she didn't break. She stared straight into her mother's eyes. You gave me a roof, but Henry gave me a home. And tonight I'm taking it back. Victor lunged, knife flashing under the bulb. Madison dodged, the blade slicing her sleeve. The room exploded into chaos. Sarah's chair toppled as she fought her restraints. Charlotte screamed for Victor to end it. Eleanor shouted above the clamor, her voice shaking for the first time. Madison, fueled by desperation and Henry's words echoing in her mind, true wealth is not money but integrity and love, snatched a broken wine bottle from the floor. She raised it, eyes blazing. The warehouse froze for a split second. Victor's grin faltered. Charlotte's smirk shattered. Eleanor's pearl necklace trembled against her throat. Madison's voice cut like steel. This ends tonight. No more threats. No more lies. You want war? Here I am. The bulb overhead swung wildly, shadows crashing across the walls. And in that moment the entire family legacy hung by a thread, ready to snap. The air in the warehouse was heavy with fear and rage, every breath sharp like broken glass. Madison stood her ground, the shattered bottle trembling in her hand, the folder of Henry's papers pressed against her chest. Then over the roar of waves outside, a voice cut through the chaos, calm, steady but commanding. Enough. Everyone froze. It wasn't Victor or Charlotte or even Eleanor. It was Sarah. Her gag had slipped as she struggled, and now, with a voice strained but firm, she spat out words that sliced through the room. "Tell her, Eleanor. Tell Madison the truth, or I will." Charlotte's head snapped toward her mother, confusion flashing across her face. "Mother? What is she talking about?" Eleanor's mask cracked for the first time. Her lips quivered, her eyes darting to Madison, then back to the folder in her hands. "You don't know what you're saying, Sarah. Stay out of this." But Madison, her pulse racing, pressed forward. "What truth?" she demanded. "What are you hiding from me?" Sarah's voice broke, tears streaking her cheeks. "Henry wasn't just protecting you, Madison. He was protecting the truth about you. About who you really are." Charlotte scoffed, trying to regain control. More lies. More manipulations. Typical of anyone siding with her. But Eleanor's silence said everything. Her pearl necklace rattled as her fingers trembled. Madison's breath hitched. "Tell me. Now." Eleanor's eyes hardened, but her voice came out as a whisper drenched in venom and defeat. "You were never my charity, Madison. You were Henry's blood. His first child. Born long before Charlotte. Before me." The words detonated in the room. Charlotte's face went pale, her jaw slack. Victor cursed under his breath, the knife slipping in his grip. Sarah sobbed, her relief mixing with anguish. Madison felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Blood. His blood. Not an outsider. Not a project. Not pity. Henry had chosen her because she was his daughter. Eleanor's voice cracked, anger finally spilling through her perfect facade. "I tried to bury it. Tried to bury you. But Henry, he refused. That's why he left you the legacy, the papers, the proof. Everything you hold in your hands. It was never a gift. It was your birthright." Charlotte stumbled backward, shaking her head violently. No, that's not true. I'm his daughter. I'm the heir. Me." But Madison no longer trembled. Her grip on the folder tightened, her voice ringing clear, steady, unshakable. "You're right about one thing, Charlotte. This isn't a gift. It's mine. By blood, by truth, and by love. And no matter how hard you fight, no matter what lies you spin, you can't erase who I am." For the first time in her life, Madison felt the weight of her father's love and the clarity of her place in this world. Not charity. Not a shadow. But the true heir of Henry Whitmore. And that truth was the weapon sharper than any blade Victor carried. The warehouse fell into stunned silence, the tide turning not with violence but with revelation. Charlotte's scream shattered the silence. "No. You're lying. She's nothing. She's nothing." Her voice cracked, raw and desperate, as she clawed at the air like she could tear the truth itself apart. Her heels skidded on the warehouse floor, her polished mask gone. All that remained was a woman drowning in her own rage. Madison stood frozen, her pulse steady despite the chaos. The folder pressed against her chest was no longer just paper. It was Henry's voice, echoing through time, louder than Charlotte's shrieks. Victor slammed his fist against a steel beam, the clang reverberating like thunder. His knife slipped from his hand, clattering to the floor. His face, once so smug, so unshakable, twisted with fear. "You set me up," he hissed, glaring at Eleanor. "You told me she was weak. That she had nothing. Now the whole damn legacy is hers." Eleanor didn't answer. She couldn't. Her pearls snapped under her trembling hands, beads scattering across the floor like broken promises. For decades she had been the queen, controlling every move, every whisper in the Whitmore empire. Now her throne crumbled beneath her feet. Madison's voice cut through the storm, calm but unyielding. "All this time you tried to bury me. But you buried yourselves. Your lies, your greed, your hate. That's what destroyed this family." Charlotte lunged toward her, but Sarah threw herself between them, shielding Madison with a courage that surprised even her. "Enough, Charlotte. Look at yourself. You've already lost." Charlotte's chest heaved, her mascara running down her cheeks in black rivers. Her hands shook as if she wanted to strangle both women but couldn't find the strength anymore. And then the final fracture came. Eleanor's voice, once cold and commanding, broke into a whisper. "He loved her more than us. More than me. And I could never forgive him for that." The confession hung heavy in the air. Charlotte's face collapsed in horror. You knew? You knew she was his daughter. And you let me live a lie? You let me fight for scraps while she had everything? Tears burned down Charlotte's cheeks, not from sorrow but from the realization that her mother, her partner in cruelty, had used her as a pawn. Victor turned away, muttering curses under his breath, his empire of control dissolving in seconds. Without Eleanor's lies and Charlotte's venom, he was nothing. The warehouse no longer felt like a battlefield. It felt like a grave. The Whitmore legacy, once polished and untouchable, lay in ruins, broken by the truth Henry had left behind. Madison didn't need to raise her hand. She didn't need to scream. The truth had done the work for her. And as Charlotte collapsed to her knees, sobbing, her voice hoarse from denial, Madison realized something powerful. She hadn't just survived their war. She had ended it. But victory came with a cost. The family name would never recover. The mansion, the empire, the legacy, everything would be ashes in the wake of this revelation. And Madison, clutching the folder, knew one thing for certain. Her father's truth had freed her, but it had destroyed them all. I walked out of that warehouse with the folder pressed against my chest, the night air colder than I remembered. Behind me, the echoes of screams and broken promises lingered, but I didn't look back. Not once. For the first time in my life, I wasn't carrying their shadows. I was carrying the truth. My father hadn't left me money to flaunt or power to wield. He left me something far more dangerous: clarity. He wanted me to see the Whitmores for what they truly were. To understand that love cannot be bought, and family is not built on greed or manipulation. Charlotte, Eleanor, Victor, they destroyed themselves chasing control. And in the end, all that control slipped through their fingers like sand. I didn't win because I fought harder. I won because I refused to become them. Walking back into the city lights, I finally understood what my father had been trying to teach me all along. Sometimes the greatest inheritance isn't wealth. It's freedom. The freedom to walk away. The freedom to choose who you become. And as I held that folder tighter, I made myself a promise. I would not waste my life proving them wrong. I would spend my life building something right. Because in the end, the greatest revenge is living a life they could never destroy. And if this story made you stop and think, if it stirred something in your heart the way it did in mine, then don't keep it to yourself. Share it. Talk about it. Let it remind someone else that they, too, can walk away from the things that break them. And if you want to walk with me through more stories like this one, lessons hidden in the shadows, truths buried in silence, stay close. Subscribe, leave your thoughts below, and let's keep building this circle of voices together. Because every time you speak up, every time you listen, every time you hit that little heart or that button that keeps us connected, you're proving one simple truth. Stories don't just belong to the teller. They belong to everyone who dares to hear them.